Tonight, Tony Khan announced that CM Punk is back. He will be back on June the 17th, the debut of Collision. And we'll talk about the reaction in the building during the review. This is not an unexpected announcement, but I would say anything regarding CM Punk, it is always, until confirmed, there are always going to be, I guess, skeptics, questions, doubts. But this was officially made on Wednesday night by Tony Khan. And as much as people want to, make it a joke about these Tony Khan big announcements, let's look at the recent track record. The last three announcements have been the largest show in company history for All In, a new primetime 2-hour show on TNT on Saturday nights, and the return of CM Punk. I mean, at least you cannot say that he is, just announcements and he's sending you softballs with these announcements. These have been pretty significant announcements for the company.
Yeah. I think they work. They do a good job of driving interest to audiences before.
Got this one out before the new Vanderpump Rules started. So very smart, strategic announcement.
If there was any criticism that is deserved, I think it's maybe how the stretching out of these announcements, or at least the public perception of a stretching out of what is essentially one announcement. We're doing Collision and we're going to lead with CM Punk. Due to circumstances, he had to delay at least one portion of that announcement to, another week. But we had the combination of announcing Collision, then announcing Chicago, then announcing CM Punk stretched out between 3 weeks. So, as a gimmick,
I don't think you're getting this announcement way if Chicago sells out over the last week. I think that why would you announce it? If the United Center sells out like it did for Punk's first arrival? Are they announcing Punk this week? To what? Certainly you want to build up that television audience, but I would say if the United Center sold out, that would be a microcosm of the larger audience that all expect Punk, and that there's a giant interest in this show that maybe you don't need a Punk. The Chicago sales, I mean, they've been fine, and I think that they are going to get a real hit or a surge with this announcement. But as we've gone over, the other Collision numbers are also worth watching with this announcement, for Toronto, for Calgary, for all of them that they have coming up over the next 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, who's to say? I think eventually they probably would have announced Punk sometime in the next month before that first episode, or I should say, what is it now?
No, 2
17
weeks.
days. Yeah. 17 days until. Yeah, so I mean, now actually, if they were going to announce it, it would seem like it was decent timing. Maybe just as always, this sort of ace in their pocket, they could always announce it. Exactly. Yes, they could always announce it just to spur last minute ticket interest. But we'll see. That's really the big question. How much the on sale benefits from this, and how much the other Collision dates benefit from it as well.
Yeah, the latest ticket sales that WrestleTix had was Chicago at just under 6,900 tickets out, which again, it's by the regular standards, that's a good number. There's a lot more you can fit in the United Center, but it is not as though the show is bombing in Chicago. It's a very healthy number. Now, Toronto on June 24th is at just under 1,800, and that is not a good number for the Scotiabank Arena the night before Forbidden Door. So that's one to watch. Calgary is at about 3,300 as well, which that's a big arena on top of it in Calgary. So, I mean, to me, Chicago, I think you would expect the natural movement, but I'm more interested in these other cities for Collision. That I think everyone is going to take this to mean that Punk is on all of these Collision dates, unless he has some prior commitment that can't be on some week, but most Collisions he'll be there.
I think if that was the case, they should have explicitly said that, because I don't think it's a guarantee.
Oh, you mean tonight they should have said, yeah. I don't disagree that they could have made it CM Punk is coming to Collision and he is
he will be on all these dates.
Yeah. And I guess we can't say 100% he is on all of these Collision dates, but if he was, you're right. They should have made that clear. That CM Punk will be the Collision.
Well, maybe that's next week's announcement.
Could be.
And the week after. He's going to be in Regina. Stay tuned next week when I will announce whether or not he will be in Saskatchewan. Or actually, that's also Regina. That's Regina, right? So it's Calgary.
They've got,
whatever.
It's Toronto, then Regina.
Hamilton.
Calgary. Oh, yeah. Hamilton's right after Toronto on the Thursday.
Yeah, right.
For Wednesday nights, for the foreseeable future, we will be doing these doubleheaders where we will review Dynamite free for all. And then for all the cool kids out there, you can jump on with us after the Dynamite review to the Post Wrestling Cafe. postwrestlingcafe.com. All tiers will be able to access as we go live, and we will chat about that week's Dark Side of the Ring episode. Tonight, we will start with the Chris and Tammy episode covering Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch that aired on Tuesday evening on Vice TV. So go over postwrestlingcafe.com. As soon as this review is done, the link has already been sent out to all patrons, or you can join us video.postwrestling.com, and we will be doing this throughout the duration of season 4 of Dark Side of the Ring. And as an add-on to that, Thursday, Brandon Thurston and I will be chatting with Evan Husney, the co-creator and executive producer of the series. We'll chat about episode 1 and what is in store for season 4, some of the subjects, tales from the territories that they did last year, and the gap between season 3 and season 4.
Did you want to talk about like the announcement and the reception to the announcement?
Why not?
In the arena?
So Tony Khan did, again, one of his announcements backstage, and as soon as his name was made, like it was like a loud reaction, and then they quickly found lots of like CM Punk shirts, but it was a very divided reaction to CM Punk, and I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing that he's coming in as this polarizing figure. I think that is to be assumed. He is not going to have a mixed reaction night one, and I guess what is your expectation of how, let's say, his second appearance is in Toronto the next Saturday? What kind of reaction is Punk getting in Toronto?
So I think a lot of it. I think if Punk showed up in Toronto tomorrow, you would have very much the same reaction that, this San Diego crowd seemed to give to him. And that's a one of a mixed reaction. That's one reaction of people who might be just tired of the bullshit by this point. Reactions of people who might see him as the aggressor and the person who is wrong in this entire all-out brawl. And I think outside of Chicago, you have a lot of that sentiment. What at least, would let me wait to see is what I need to see what he says in Chicago. Because if he comes out in Chicago and takes some level of ownership and baby faces himself that way, I think there's a chance that the rest of the audience can, just kind of like forget about it. But who's to say they want to? Maybe they want to run with this heel, character who's a babyface in Chicago. It's, CM Punk from Chicago versus the world. As long as it draws attention and draws money to Collision, I don't think Tony Khan nor CM Punk should worry about it at all. I don't think this at any point diminishes his star power. And that's the most important thing.
I think the bigger thing is that if you go into Toronto and let's say it's 8,000 people that end up being at this show, who cares what their reaction is? I'd be much more concerned if it was 3,000 people in this arena, and that would tell you that it's an audience that it is fine to hate this guy, but we are still willing to spend money to see this guy versus he is such a turnoff. And I do not think he is a turnoff in any sense to people. And listen, this is not a guy. First of all, that Chicago appearance, he's going to cut an incredible promo. He's going to be a giant star as soon as he walks out in front of a crowd that's going to be very receptive to him. It's going to be the future weeks that will be interesting to see. But this is not a performer that is going to get rattled. And I think you can go in there. Maybe it's going to be a babyface reaction. Maybe it's not. I mean, we saw how Chicago reacted to the Elite. It's not the worst thing in the world that you'll have these different audience reactions, and it's all in how you manipulate that to your own business and to your own direction.
I think there's a real potential that he could flourish as a heel, and at this point, if he's only a babyface in Chicago, he would essentially be a heel everywhere else. And I think that would be an interesting twist on this run of CM Punk's in AEW, a heel CM Punk's. Now, is there any sort of detriment to like portraying Punk as a heel for a TV show that you're trying to push on a Saturday night? Well, if he has the right opposition, I don't think so at all. Roman Reigns is a heel, and he's a biggest star in the company right now. So yeah, let's see how they play it.
To me, it would, if you were to see this guy coming in and it's a very hostile reaction and you come to that conclusion that the heel route is the best one, I think you have to really revisit the idea of MJF as a heel at that point and whether he is more valuable as the babyface and how you get to that of this. Here is the guy that, as you can see, they have very much taken his kind of mission statement. It's still the whole bidding war of 2024, but it's more so of there's no challengers for me. I'm bored here, as opposed to running down the company and that it's like an anti AEW slant. It's more so he is looking at like, I've beaten everyone and I think that you can make that pivot. And I think it's an audience that ultimately they want to be behind an MJF. I think you could make that turn, but you would have to have the right person, and Punk would be that person. But he could also come in, and we have seen plenty of times when the famous one everyone always brings up is how ECW was just this anti-corporate wrestling crowd. And then Sid shows up and he's the biggest star in the world. Like, here's a guy that just screams like New York, WWF, and he comes and they're just in love with him. And for Punk, it's if he had walked out in front of this crowd in San Diego tonight in person, would it have been a mixed reaction, or would they have lost their minds to have seen CM Punk?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. No, that's a great point. Yeah. Like, no matter how mixed the mention of a CM Punk might be today, the moment his star power shines in front of somebody live in person, it's going to be a big reaction. But of course, so much of it will be determined by what he says and how they decide to push his character.
It's a great hook for the first episode of Collision. Like, there's going to be a ton of anticipation for all these questions and to see what he says. I think that I thought it was the right call to announce his name, especially when you saw what the ticket sales were. Like, it made a whole lot of sense. Had they sold out, I think you don't have to, but I think this is, a solid amount of time to build anticipation. And I guess the alternate question is, I don't think you're going to be seeing any of like the elephant in the room not being addressed. I don't see them bringing up the brawl. And unless they eventually get to an angle involving it, like, I don't see them addressing any of that. And does the audience take that as like, you're insulting us by not calling out what is so obvious?
There's got to be some reference to it, right? In this initial promo.
It's hard to imagine not having some reference, but it's been pretty like this is the untouchable topic for AEW.
I'm honestly just as curious to know internally, have those talks happen between, the principal characters involved in the brawl out? Where do things stand between them? We've heard about Jericho and Punk meeting up, but has Punk and Tony, have they sat down with the rest of the elite? Where does everything stand at this point?
Listen, if everything was great, we would not be having separate shows and different rosters and all this potential stuff, which is all, subject to change. But I would say that it would be like, we would not be having this Saturday, Wednesday divide with Punk and the others if everyone, because the obvious is like, if everyone could be on the same page, let's make money off of this. Like, that is the clear, obvious answer for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.